You know it. I know.
30 years? 30 years? Wait, are you asking from the perspective of the certificate seems to have expired? No, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Girls, it's fine.
Package what?
It has an okay.
That's fine.
But turn it over, and it says may have dairy.
Not to be consumed by people.
May have what?
May have dairy. But that's, I think that's
Nothing
because I would
about
say.
Local route.
That's a disclaimer.
I think
Everybody.
it's say that for allergies.
Yeah,
No.
I think so.
You want to use it on Shabbos and sell to your Rav.
Oh, because they're not talking about
Because you
Hilchos
can't
Shabbos.
So that's a whole question about whether or not you can, whether or not, there are people who have different opinions as to whether or not you can, you can build sort of the spritzing. That's the business. Okay. Well, that's a whole different story. That's not just Shabbos.
Consult your nutritionist.
That's just not Shabbos. Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome back. We're trying a new technology to see if it's any more stable for people. I've heard complaints from people that the YouTube is not so stable. Sometimes you can't get in. So we'll see. As of right now, nobody has joined us on any of the 3 shiurim I've given with the new technology. Nobody has joined us. So we'll see. Listen, you never know. You never know. We'll see what happens. We might go back to the old technology. Sometimes the old technology is better. Sometimes the old technology is, well, obviously, sometimes, look, there are people who can't get out so easily, whatever. So sometimes the older technology is better. I was talking to an attorney who schleps like these big briefcases full of paper. I said, everybody carries so much paper today. He says, no, the younger people, right, they have everything, So, but for me, I can't. I need paper and pen. I need to do paper and pen. Okay, so we'll take both. Anyway, it's good to have you all back. As much as I love Yom Tov, which I do, I also love getting back to the regular Seder and getting back to class, preparing for class, and most importantly, what I learned from all of you is very fulfilling for me. So thank you for coming back. This is our 30th year. That's hard to believe. But Baruch Hashem, I was 30 when I came here to Great Neck. So that's like an amazing thing. But Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's get back to learning. Okay, that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we do best, right? It absolutely does. Yep, absolutely does. Okay. You've been in Great Neck for 44 years. Don't look at Dave for 43 years.
We joined the shul as soon as we came.
44 years. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. Baruch Hashem. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, today we're talking about the continuation of Tuma, right? One of these very exciting and thrilling topics. Obviously not an easy topic, but nevertheless an important topic for the things that we can learn from it. Of course, Tuma and Tahara really don't apply to us. It's an unfortunate thing, right? It's not that wow, Baruch Hashem, Tuma and Tahara don't apply to us. It's sort of like my wife says to me, she says, you could be the most popular rabbi in the world if you get together with other rabbis and do away with the second day of Yom Tov. She said it would be, all right, so that's not going to happen. The closest we can do is move to Israel. But the idea, in Yirtz Hashem, one day we'll have a Beis HaMikdash, and in Yirtz Hashem, one day the laws of Tumah and Tahara will apply to us again. Right now, Tumah and Tahara don't apply to us in the traditional sense, certainly not in the sense of the Chumash, except in maybe 2 areas. Area number 1 is the observance of Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity, and Nida. The concept of Nida is a vestige of Tuma and Tahara, not the Nida of the Chumash. Nida of the Chumash is different. There are 2 concepts in the Chumash that have become blended into one observance of women for the last centuries, and that is Nida and Zava have sort of come together into the observance of the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, the way that we understand it today. So that's one vestige of tuma that's left for us. The other vestige of tuma which is left for us in a similar vein is the concept of balkari. Balkari is when a man has a seminal emission. So then goes to the mikvah. That's the Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Rosh Hashanah mikvah, right? Men go to the mikvah, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur. Not just this idea of spiritual purity, but to cleanse themselves, so to speak. And that word is a bad choice. Cleansing, clean, unclean. These are not appropriate choices for tuma and tahara. Even purify is not it. Purify implies something impure. Impure has a moral connotation to it. I prefer to stay with the ideas, with the concepts of tuma and tahara, and we'll see a little bit how those are connected.
What page are you?
We're not on any page yet. We are on page, let's see. Chukas. Page 830, 840.
So you prefer just to use the biblical terms?
I prefer staying with the terms of tuma and tahara, to be mitame someone, to be mitayer someone, because those are the correct terms, right? There was no English, right? So to say clean, unclean, pure, impure, yes, it is true that those concepts, that the way in which certain things were observed, those concepts, those English word concepts came along with it. But I think it takes away, I think it takes away from the tuma and tahara ideas that we're talking about. Okay. And the third, so we have nida, we have balkari, and the third thing that we really have is kohen, right? Kohen and tuma. So kohen doesn't go to a cemetery, kohen doesn't go to a funeral. We'll talk about all of these things. But so that's the idea. Those are the vestiges of tuma that we have. Last time we met back in June, we began the discussion, back in June, right? We began the discussion of what's the underlying rationale in this concept of tuma and tahara. And I introduced the concept that I heard from Rav Soloveitchik of tuma being associated with either actual death or tuma being associated with loss of potential life. And since Judaism stands for and everything revolves around the importance of life, death then becomes the antithesis. And when a person is impacted by death, that creates this status of tuma. And the status of tuma has its ramifications. I can't come to the Beis Hamikdash. It distances me a little bit from my normal connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that is this rational kind of approach to tuma and tahara. I handed you an article from Rav Uri Cohen from Midreshet HaRova, a fascinating article in which he discusses this same idea, the same concept, connecting it to the Soloveitchik family about and I think for many people that works. It's logical. It's appeals to our 21st century sensibilities, our evolving, whatever it is, right? It works for us. However, I also gave you an article from Rabbi Frand, which is called Tuma and Tahara, right, Defy Our Understanding, in which Rabbi Frand takes the exact opposite approach, right? Rabbi Frand's approach to Tuma and Tahara is, guess what? It's impossible to understand, right? These are not things that make sense. These are not things that are logical. It's within the category of a chok, all right? What is the whole concept of the para aduma called? Zos chukas haTorah. Tuma and Tahara is within the concept of, within the category of chok. It defies human reasoning. It defies logical explanation. It is simply a gezeras hamelech. That's what God said. And as a result of that's what God said, that's what we do. no different than any of the other chukim that appear for us in the Torah. No different than the chok of kashrus. According to many commentators, kashrus is a chok, right? It is a law that defies rational explanation. Why we can't mix milk and meat together? I mean, I have seen scientific reasons advanced, but all of them pale in the face of the idea that people who do not observe kashrus seem to be as healthy as people who do observe kashrus. Now, we don't know if they're spiritually healthy. That's a different story. And we do know that what we take in does indeed impact on us. We know that not only scientifically, we know it theologically as well. But the concept, this idea that Tumah and Tara is a chok, can't explain it. I can't explain why if I touch a dead body, I become tamei, and if I touch something else, I'm the tamei that item. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why does a mikvah work to fix this issue? Why does being sprinkled with a mixture of mayim chayim and ashes of a paraduma, how does that work to fix this, right? To make me tahor if I was tamei? It defies, it defies explanation. Yes, of course, I can talk about what a mikveh represents and the concept of mayim chayim and rebirth and all of those things. But the bottom line, says Rabbi Fran, is that Tumah and Tahara defy our logical explanation. So we have these two frameworks within which to work, so to speak, right? The idea of a rational, logical understanding of Tumah and Tahara as Rav Soloveitchik put forward, and an idea that Tumah and Tahara really defy the laws of logic. So whenever something makes sense to you, you can side with the Soloveitchikian philosophy. And whenever Tumah and Tahara laws don't make sense to you, know that you have Rabbi Fran to rely on as well, and what Rabbi Fran is suggesting. Both of these are valid approaches, albeit polar opposite approaches, valid approaches to Tumah and Tahara. Okay, yes.
Here it says Zot Chukat Torah, but in the other dimensions of discussions with Tumah and Tahara, is Chukat Torah mentioned? And if not, then how does Rabbi Frand answer that? In other words,
specifically
is this
Rabbi
one
Frand
called the chok?
Rabbi Frand is saying is that the para aduma is the paradigmatic example of Tumah and Tahara, and everything flows from that.
Nida,
right?
The kahuna stuff.
It all flows from that, correct. It all flows from that.
How do you spell Balkari? What is Balkari?
Carry, kuf ratio. Right, Balkari, kuf ratio.
Also, doesn't it separate Judaism from death cultures, which was popular or practiced? So it's in other words, it's reinforcing monotheism in the direction that Moses took us to.
I think that's accurate. I think that's accurate also.
Even
yes.
Today, there are death cultures, especially in the Asian world, that have no relevance to us at all. So that these practices kept us on, theologically, I understand that there's no, you have to believe it, but practically it works because it keeps you away from the Egyptian cultures. It keeps you away from any culture that would keep their dead and worship them as gods in the future.
Yeah, no, I think Raylene, you're absolutely right. And I think that, we can find logical explanations for these things. But that's the beauty of Torah. The beauty of Torah is that it has shivim panims, right? 70, not literally 70, but a different number of approaches, all of which can be valid. And I think that's as valid as Rabbi Fran's approach, as Rav Soloveitchik's approach. Okay, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about Tumah and Tahara. I find it helpful when we talk about Tumah and Tahara to use as a construct the different levels of cooking on Shabbos, right? Cooking. So what do I mean? So we all know that on Shabbos, there is something called right? That is the quintessential cooking. That's a pot on top of a fire. Then there's a kli sheni. That's the object into which the food from the kli rishon goes. And then there's a kli shlishi, and that would be a third object. So the classical example is chicken soup in a pot, kli rishon. Chicken soup from the pot into the tureen, is that what it's called? Tureen? Tureen, okay. Into the tureen is kli sheni. Chicken soup from the tureen into the bowl is kli shlishi. Okay, so just everything is one, right? It's one step removed. I don't think does anybody use a tureen anymore?
We'll have a ladle. It's also cliche.
So the ladle might be kli. It might be a kli sheni. It might acquire the status of a kli rishon. You have to be careful with the ladle a little bit. Okay.
Yes.
You can only use the best market ladles. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about how a person becomes tamei. Right? How does an individual become tamei? We're talking about our pasuk Yud Aleph, page 840, verse 11, is talking about one way in which a person becomes tamei. And what is that? So let's look at the wording of the pasuk Yud Aleph. Hanogeya b'meis. We're just going to take those two words. Hanogeya b'meis. What does that mean? One who touches a dead body, right? A dead, or actually one who touches a dead, and then l'chol nefesh adam tells us it's a dead human body, right? One who touches a dead human, right? I guess, right? One who touches a dead human as opposed to one who touches a
Human corpse.
Okay, right, correct. Thank you. You got it. Okay, so clearly touching is one way in which tuma is transmitted. Now, on one level, you could say, hey, that makes sense. All right, I touched something. So if I touch something, there's some kind of transfer that takes place, right? So that, I hear that, right? And that could be, at least from a logical perspective, okay, you could say that, right? But if you would look at tuma as transmitting some kind of disease, so then that would make sense. In other words, I touched it. So since I touched it, whatever it had got transmitted to me. Okay, however, nogeya, right? Nogeya, which means touching, right? You took, the kids, right? They go, right? They maybe weren't Shomer Negiah before they go to Israel, and now they're Shomer Negiah when they come back from Israel. Shomer Negiah means there's no
Physical contact.
no, that's not really what Shomer Negiah means. In other words, if you go out on a date and the person you're dating trips and falls, so it helping that person up is not considered Shomer Negiah. Is not considered a violation of being Shomer Negiah.
That's good.
Right. Similarly, right.
I'm not sure they all know
That
that.
would be
Right,
a bender.
right.
Deal breaker.
Deal breaker. Who looks over her?
Check with it.
Why are you assuming it was she who fell? Maybe he fell. Okay, but maybe he fell. It is relating to a negiah shel chiba. That is the ultimate understanding of Shomer Negiah. Shomer Negiah, in its purest sense, means avoiding physical contact that has an emotional context to it, right? So holding hands is a good example of a physical contact that has some kind of emotional context to it. Generally, you're not holding hands with a member of the opposite sex unless there is some kind of emotional bond there, okay? Unless, of course, one of them is hanging off the building, in which case the hand-holding might be, But nevertheless, having said that, clearly there are individuals who observe Shomer Negiah in a more extreme sense by avoiding all contact, all physical contact with the opposite sex. Now, of course, it does not mean that these are individuals who would walk over a person who has fallen or not pull a person out of the path of an oncoming bus, but it means that they will avoid all other kinds of physical contact. So whereas I might say that shaking hands with a woman is not a violation of shomer negia, in a business, let's say in a business setting, there are individuals who would avoid even that. There are individuals who would avoid even that. And again, you have to be a little bit careful. There are people who say we live in a world in which the morals of our world are very compromised. And as a result of that, even casual physical contact can and should be avoided. Sometimes I was at a house once of a person who passed away who was a Kohen, and his son was in the house, and the police officers who were in the house, one of them happened to be a woman. And police officers are really trained very well in many areas, certainly in this area as well. And the policewoman extended her hand to this gentleman, to extend condolences on the loss of his father. And he wouldn't shake her hand. So, I had to explain to the policewoman afterwards, what was going on. And, she was very accepting. I'm sure she went back to the police car and said they're lunatics. But she was very accepting of it. But again, whether that's appropriate, inappropriate, I'm not making a judgment call. I'm just saying that it goes even to that point. So that's what nogeya is. So I touch a dead body. Now, most of us don't touch dead bodies unless we are members of the Chevra Kadisha. If we're members of a Chevra Kadisha, we might touch a dead body every single day, except Shabbos, right? If we work in the medical field, we might touch a dead body more often. If we work in a hospital, we might touch it if we're funeral directors. But for the average person, it's very rare that we touch a dead body. In fact, we generally have a little bit of an aversion to touching a dead body. And for good reason, right? For good reason. It's difficult for us. And that speaks to Rabbi Soloveitchik's interpretation of Tumah. It's difficult for us to touch a dead body. A dead body is not the same person who was alive 10 seconds ago. It's a whole different concept. But touching a dead body can very much be a part of life. Hanogeya b'meis, that a person who touches a dead body becomes tamei. Okay. Right? So either understand it from Rav Soloveitchik's perspective, understand it from Rabbi Fran's perspective, who says you can't understand it, whatever it is. Okay, you touch a dead body, you become tamei. There's a second category, a second way in which Tumah can be transmitted, and that is what we call Tumat Masa. The first is Tumat Nega. The second is Tumat Masa. What does Masa mean? What? Carrying. Yes, carrying. Okay. So wait a second. What does that mean, carrying? So if I carry a dead body, I guess I had to say dead body, right? Because you carry a live body, right?
Corpse.
Right. If I carry a corpse, thank you, Brenda. If I carry a human corpse, so I become tamei. But wait a second. Isn't that the same as touching? Isn't that the same as touching a human corpse? So I can tell you, no, it's not the same as touching a human corpse. For instance, if I carry an aron kodesh, if I carry an aron, right? If I carry a casket, or if I carry a stretcher with a dead body on it, so I become tamei, even though I haven't touched the dead body. So again, you could explain it from Rav Soloveitchik's perspective because of my proximity to a dead body. All right, that's why I become tamei. That's the second way, which is Tumat Masa, which is not touching, but moving a human corpse. Okay. There's a third way in which I can become tamei, and that's called Tumat Ohel. Tumat Ohel, the word Ohel means tent. Here, we're not translating it literally as tent. it is tuma that's within the context of a common space. That I am in a common space, a building with someone with a human corpse. And that's tumat ohel. The observance of that with which we are most familiar is a Kohen going into a funeral home, right? Many, if not all, funeral homes today have separate facilities for a Kohen to participate in the funeral, either by speaking or by viewing not in the classical funeral sense of viewing, but watching the service or even speaking from the service. But these are all separate buildings. The buildings are not connected to each other. And it's interesting, people often make a mistake, right? They make a mistake. So I'll just give you an example. There are funeral homes that have washing stations outside of the funeral homes. And those washing stations are under awnings that are attached to the building. So a Kohen who goes to wash his hands at those washing stations, right, is now under the building in which a human corpse generally is found. And that could be problematic, okay? So the way in which Tuma is transmitted by Ohel is complex. Yes, it could be a building. That's the easiest thing. It could be a building. It could be an umbrella, right? It could be an umbrella. In other words, let's say it's raining outside, okay? And I don't know, the Kohanim are standing outside under umbrellas. And one Kohen has his umbrella under the canopy of the building has a canopy. So he has his umbrella under the canopy of the building, and then umbrellas are, right, the next Kohen's umbrella is a little bit under his umbrella, the next Kohen's umbrella is a little bit under his umbrella. That could transmit Tuma from the building to all the Kohanim who are under those umbrellas, assuming that there's a continuous kind of roofing. It becomes even more complicated. Okay, we'll talk about airplane in a second. It becomes more complicated. Let's say a tree. Why can a Kohen not go into a cemetery?
Because the tree is
By the way, it's not true that a Kohen cannot go into a cemetery. There are certain cemeteries where a Kohen can go into, right? We're saying that a Kohen can't get within Dalet Amos, within 6 feet of a grave. Kohen can't be within 6 feet of a grave. There are the old cemeteries, forget it. You can't get in the door without being, 6 feet within a grave. But some of the newer cemeteries, especially let's say in New Jersey, where there's lots of real estate. So you could drive into the cemetery and not be anywhere near a dead body. Okay, so it is possible. The cemetery itself doesn't convey Tuma. It's the proximity to a human corpse that conveys Tuma. Either proximity, Dalet Amos for a Kohen, or under an Ohel. But an Ohel could also be a tree. If there's a tree that, one of these big trees, and part of the tree overhangs graves, and the other part of the tree overhangs the road, so that could be problematic.
On Main Street.
On Main Street in Queens, right? It could be problematic for a Kohen to walk under those trees, right?
Are these concepts in place in the absence of the temple? So we practice these even though the temple, I'm trying to understand.
Okay, so
why.
Raylene is asking a good question. Raylene is saying, wait a second. You began the shir by saying that their Tuma and Tahara really don't apply today because there's no Beis Hamikdash, right? So, and there's no Paraduma, so none of this, right? However, I did explain there are certain vestiges. We do have someone who joined us on Zoom. Hi, Arthur. We do have certain vestiges, right? We do have certain vestiges of Tuma and Tahara, right? We do have certain vestiges of Tuma and Tahara. I see his picture right here. Come here, Sue. Right, certain vestiges of Tuma and Tahara that indeed are applicable.
Did he answer?
Right? Yeah, he just waved. Right, certain. Right? right? Certain concepts of Tuma and Tara that are indeed applicable to the sense that I'm not a Kohen, so I do not have an obligation to avoid becoming Tameh. So I can be a member of the Chevra Kadisha, I can go to a cemetery. I don't have an obligation to avoid being Tameh. A Kohen has an obligation to avoid being Tameh. Even today, even without a Beis HaMikdash. So those laws apply to a Kohen.
When you say vestige, though, who determined this vestige? When did that come into place? So that
After the Beis HaMikdash.
So then it just kept practicing.
Correct. Okay. I mean, a Kohen always has an obligation to be careful. Okay. So that's this idea that an individual, that the Kohen has this problem of Tumas Ohel. I also have the problem of Tumas Ohel, but I don't have an obligation not to become Tameh. The Kohen who has an obligation not to become Tameh, for him, Tumas Ohel is a much bigger problem. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There are times when a Kohen has to be Mitameh himself. So, for instance, if it's one of his 7 relatives, right, 7 individuals for whom a Kohen mourns, father, mother, son, daughter, sister, unmarried sister, brother, right? If it's one of those 7 relatives for whom a Kohen mourns, he is obligated. By the way, he mourns for a married sister as well. He's just not allowed to be mitameh himself for a married sister. Interesting halacha. But in all of these instances, a Kohen is obligated to be mitameh himself. He's obligated to go bury his parents. He's obligated to bury his spouse. He's obligated to bury children, right?
But that's it, he can't visit them afterwards.
That's correct. He cannot visit them afterwards. Correct. Unless they're close to the edge of the cemetery, which is why Kohanim were traditionally buried close to the edge of the cemetery so that the Kohen can remain outside of the cemetery, not within Dalet Amos, and, quote, visit the grave. Wife, yes.
Wife? Okay,
Yes, spouse. But in this case, it would be wife because, okay.
Just checking.
Yes, okay. So this is the, right, so Raylene, in answer to your question, these are the functions of Tuma and Tara by a Kohen. Now, Sue mentioned something very interesting, and that is, what about a Kohen who flies to Israel? What's the problem with a Kohen flying to Israel?
Someone dies on a flight.
Well, somebody dying on the flight, that's true, right?
And the
That's
bodies that
a
are
problem,
transported.
right? That's a problem, right? But even without, let's say everybody stays healthy for the flight.
You're
Right.
transporting
So
the-
often El Al is transporting bodies to Israel for burial. So is that a problem? In other words, does a Kohen have to call El Al and find out, by the way, any bodies on this flight? Not anybody on this flight, but any bodies on this flight. So there are Kohanim who do that. Of course, you have to be careful
That
because
could change.
it can change at the last minute, right? It can change at the last minute. So there are Kohanim who are very careful not to fly on an airline that might be transporting a Jewish corpse to Israel unless they check in advance. Just as an interesting side point, it seems, what?
You have somebody transporting them from Florida to New York. I mean, on any airline, let's say somebody, an older person.
You're right.
That's correct. You have to, so if you're a Kohen, if you're a Kohen, if you're a Kohen, try. No, if you're a Kohen, you have to be sensitive to these things. I mean, somebody who's a Kohen who understands these laws is sensitive to these things. So yes, you're right. Traveling from Florida to New York could be a problem, right? It could be a problem. When we get to Tumat Ohel, which is a few psukim later, when we get to Tumat Ohel, we will talk about whether it applies to Jews and non-Jews equally. And that's a very crucial discussion, because how could a Kohen ever go into a hospital, right? How could a Kohen, forget the discussion, how could a Kohen become a doctor, which is a separate discussion. Doctors need to train on corpses, right? Not anymore?
They don't do that anymore.
Or they use iPads now?
No. They have simulated bodies that are actually real.
They still, Ellie's doing a corpse. He's got his own corpse.
Which
right?
medical school is he in? Which
Okay.
medical school? Oh.
Rebecca did on a corpse?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, of course.
She's not a Kohen.
Right. So there's a whole discussion about a Kohen being a doctor. I mean, that I remember that discussion back when I was in college, and Kohanim and who are pre-med, all these things. Okay, but what about a Kohen who's aware of these halachos is particular, going on a plane. So again, that if you're going to Israel and you're flying El Al, there's a good chance that if there's a body being transported on the plane, it's a Jewish body. Right? That's a good, not always, but that's a good chance, right? It's a good chance it's a Jewish body. So you need to be concerned about that. If you're coming from Florida back to New York, right? Probably a good chance it could be a Jewish body as well, right? So maybe you have to check about that. But let's say you're flying from Florida to LA, or forget Florida. Let's say you're flying from New York to LA. So you have to check that there's a dead body if you're a Kohen, right? So we do have a principle that says that we can follow what we call the majority, the rove. Rove of corpses are not Jewish corpses, right? Maybe rove of corpses going to Israel are Jewish. Rove of corpses coming from Florida to New York might be Jewish, but rove of corpses in general are not Jewish. So again, if you say that Tumat Ohel doesn't apply to someone who's not Jewish, and we have to talk about why that might be, then, for a Kohen to be on a regular flight would not be problematic. There are Kohanim, by the way, who do fly on El Al and rely on several halachic principles that say that the baggage compartment is considered a separate halachic rishus from the rest of the plane, and that it is constructed specifically with that in mind, as certain hospitals in Israel that are known to be halachically sensitive hospitals. I'm thinking Shaarei Tzedek as one. I'm sure there are others where the morgue is constructed in such a way so that it is not problematic for Kohanim. There is even a way to halachically package a body. By the way, when bodies go to Israel, they're not shipped in regular caskets, right? They're shipped in wooden boxes that are then placed into metal containers that are sealed, and there's dry ice that's packed with the body, right, to preserve the body on the trip. That cargo area is relatively cold as it is. But that's the idea. So there's halachic ways which El Al does use to close that container so that these problems don't become problems, but not all Kohanim rely on them. There are tshuvas both ways. Moshe seems to say, can't rely on it. There are other valid poskim who say that you can rely on it. But so this is the concept of Tumat, Tumat Ohel, when it comes to apply to a Kohen. Okay, let's come back up. Okay, we're not done yet. The third handout I gave you, which is called Degrees of Tumah. So when we talk about the malachos of Shabbos, how many malachos of Shabbos are there? 39 malachos of Shabbos. What do we call them? 39 avos malachos. Right? What does the word avos or avot or av mean here? It means major category. An av, technically, literally, it means a father. These are major categories that produce subsidiary categories. Do we need more? All right, I'm sorry. Subsidiary categories that thank you, Brenda. Subsidiary categories, such as offspring. That's what they're considered, like offspring. So in Shabbos, we have avos malachos. We have something called an av malacha. And then we have something called a tolda. A tolda literally means an offspring. It's a derivative malacha, a derivative malacha. So we have avos and toldos. So the same thing in Tuma. We have avos, we have major categories of tuma, an av hatuma, and then we have something called a vlad hatuma. Vlad hatuma means the offspring, a subsidiary, a derivative kind of tuma. So let's look at the list that you have in front of you. All right, degrees of tuma. So we start with avi avos hatuma, right? The daddy of all tumos, the major category of all tumos is a human corpse or a metal utensil that touches a human corpse. That is the avi avos hatuma. Okay, avi avos hatuma. Now, when we talk about utensils here, there's an interesting application to sukkos that we just finished. Okay, I don't know what you use on top of your sukkah, but most people today use bamboo mats on top of their sukkah. And these are bamboo mats that you go to one of these sukkah depot or something like that, and you buy these bamboo mats, and when you leave, you went in with 2 arms, and when you leave, you have half an arm left. They cost, or an arm and a leg, right? So they're not, these bamboo mats are not inexpensive, okay? The CRC, which is the Chicago Rabbinical Council, came out with a ruling last year that there are certain mats that are sold by Home Depot that are considered valid mats for sukkahs, for use in sukkahs. They are bamboo fences, basically, that can be used for the sukkah. There's a couple of caveats to their use, but it is much cheaper. You could basically cover your sukkah with these bamboo mats for $100, whereas you can probably not even buy one bamboo mat for $100 in a sukkah depot. I don't want to deprive the people of sukkah depot from their livelihood. But it would be nice if we can have more people observing the mitzvah of sukkah properly. So there are these mats. What are we concerned with all of these things? We're concerned that they become a kli, right? In order for something to be mekabel tuma, in order for something to become tameh, it has to have the status of a kli. A kli is a vessel, a utensil, right? If I have something that's not a vessel or a utensil, it can't become tameh. So when I string bamboo poles together, which is essentially what these bamboo mats are, they're split bamboo poles that are strung together. Did I make a kli or did I not make a kli? So what did I use to string it together? How was it supported? All of those things. So if you want more information on that, you need to replace your bamboo mats. You can go to the CRC. I think it's crcweb.org or something like that, and you could do a search and find that information. Okay, so we start out with the human corpse, which is avi avos hatuma. Okay, then there is something called an av hatuma, right, which goes down one level. And what is an av hatuma? So you have a person that touches a human corpse. So if there's a human corpse, I touch it. The human corpse is avi avos hatuma. I become an av hatuma. The human corpse is the preeminent category of tuma. It is the paradigmatic category of tuma. Any of the big words I can think of, right? That's the human corpse. Avi avos hatuma. That's the top. That's the box. That's his top box. Avi avos hatuma. If I touch it, so I become tameh. That's our pasuk. Hanogea b'meis. If I touch it, I become tameh. But my level of tuma is one step down. And I'm not an avi avos hatuma now. What am I? I'm an av hatuma. I'm an av hatuma. Who cares? I'm still tameh, right? But now something that I touch or something that touches me is not the same. In other words, let's say I did my tahara, right? I'm a member of the Chevra Kadisha. I did my tahara, and I come home, and or on the way out, I shake hands with the funeral director, right? So I touched an avi avos hatuma, but I'm only an av hatuma. So when the funeral director is shaking hands with me, he's touching an av hatuma, not an avi avos hatuma. In other words, I've gone down a level. A nevela is an av hatuma. What's a nevela?
An animal.
An animal that died. An animal that wasn't shechted properly. is a nevela. So either an animal that dies by itself, right? The raccoon that dies in your backyard, or a goat that wasn't shechted properly. The shochet made a mistake. So that's called a nevela. A nevela is an av hatuma. A limb from a living animal is an av hatuma. A dead sheretz, right? What's a dead sheretz? No, it's not a bug. It's not a bug. It's a creepy crawly thing, right? I mean, bugs can be creepy crawling things. The Torah
Like a
lists.
centipede?
No, not a centipede. The Torah. Here, I'll give you a rat.
A
Right?
rat?
The Torah lists. Right? The Torah gives us a list of shiratzim. The Torah gives us a list of shiratzim. Oh, do I have it here? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. On page 3, Tumas Sheretz, okay? Let's see. Here we have, right, a weasel, a mouse, a tortoise, I don't know, a crocodile, hedgehog, a lizard, a snail, a mole. I mean, all of these things, okay?
Reptilian thing.
Yeah, reptilian things, right? Things that you will, let's put it this way, you would avoid them alive. You would, if they were in your house alive, you would be out of the house. And right, something that causes you to scream. All right, something that causes you to scream, if it's dead, is a sheret, a dead sheretz. All right? Okay, a zav, a zava, or a mitzora. Right, a zav, a zava, or a mitzora. Mitzora is somebody who has this, I'm back on the first page, right? Zav, zava, or mitzora, that's somebody who has this bodily emission. Nida is in that category, the way we observe it today. And a metal utensil that touches an av, right? Metal utensils have particular, okay. So now we're going down one level to Rishon. Rishon is one level down. So something that touches an av. Meaning, I did my tahara, I left the funeral home, I shook hands with the mailman. So the body that I cleansed was an avi avos hatuma. I'm an av hatuma. The mailman is now a rishon latuma. In other words, this is what I said when I mentioned at the beginning of the shir, kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. All right, the mailman is now a rishon latuma. Okay, and then you have the other types that are there. Sheni applies to food, and you see there's a sheni latuma, shlishi, and revi'i. All of these, right, that are unique. These are all right. Sheni, shlishi, and revi'i are unique kinds of situations. But I wanted you to sort of understand that there are different levels of progression. About tuma, page 2 talks about, is a chart as to how this all sort of goes together. Page 3 introduces a little bit more about avi avos hatuma, to a corpse tuma. You see the 3 categories of maga, masa, and ohel, right? Maga, masa, and ohel. By the way, it's interesting that if we disinter a body, there is a certain degree of tuma that is associated with that, because you are disinterring bones, disinterring to unbury, to exhume. Let's say somebody's buried in America and I want to transport the body 10 years later to Israel. Well, under most circumstances, maybe 10 years is too soon. Let's say 20 years later, right? In most circumstances, 20 years later, there's very little that remains of the body. Whatever has been decomposed, there might be some bones, but most of the body has decomposed already. So we're talking about bones. So tumas, human corpse tumas sheretz, and the last page talks about tumas nevela and hechsher ochalin. Again, if you have nothing to do and you want to read these things, please. Yes.
What about a body what about an execution of a apikor, someone who is so put outside the Jewish community for heinous sin, and he is executed. Does that body have the tomb? It does?
Yep.
It's considered?
Yep. Yisrael afal pi shechata Yisraelhu, right? That as long as this person is halachically considered Jewish, so then it's a Jewish body.
Even though the soul has been cast aside. So Truma doesn't have anything to do with the spiritual of the soul afterwards?
Soul's not around. Once that person dies, the soul is not there.
Okay. So this is
Right.
all about the physical presence on earth. That's the only thing this has to do with.
Okay.
Is that it? Okay, because it doesn't really, then it's at odds, because why would we be so fearful of something that's only on earth that has no ramifications in the afterlife?
So that's interesting. I mean, that is precisely Rabbi Soloveitchik's position of Tumah and Tahara, right? Permanence versus transience.
Right, so,
All right. So let's come back. Yes, so go ahead.
Just one thing. Is it possible to lose your kahuna by some action of marrying the wrong person?
Is it possible to lose your kahuna?
And
No.
it's-
An
no, it's
individual
not.
cannot lose his kahuna. An individual can, let's say that a Kohen marries someone to whom he is not allowed to be married. So their offspring, any male children that they have are called halalim. So technically speaking, they cannot halalim. Chet lamed lamed yud mem, right? From like chilul Hashem or chol, meaning that they don't have the kedusha of the kahuna, right? They're descended from a kohen, but they don't have the kedusha of the kahuna. So technically speaking, they can't get the first aliyah. I mean, they can't go up to duchen, things like that.
The children.
The children.
And that's for
The Kohen himself, and these rules would always apply to him. The two-
Yeah.
And it goes all the way down.
once you lose it, you lose it.
Once you lose it, that's
He
it.
doesn't lose it.
No, but I'm saying once his
The
children
halal.
have
It's
lost
broken,
it,
it's broken.
it's broken. Okay.
The lineage
Let's
is
go.
broken.
Back to the pasuk. Okay. Page 840, after that brief introduction. Page 840, verse 11. The Torah says, Hanogeya b'meis l'chol nefesh adam. Right? What does this mean, l'chol nefesh adam? Right? Hameya b'meis l'chol nefesh adam. So what is okay. Rashi explains the mace benefesh. Says Rashi, ve'eze mace. What kind of mace are we talking about? Says Rashi, we are talking about a mace shel nefesh adam. Lahotzi nefesh behema she'ein tum'asa tzricha haza'ah. Right, that it is coming to exclude the corpse of an animal. I don't know, is an animal, the carcass of an animal, whatever the word is, right? The dead animal. It's coming to exclude a dead animal. As we saw on our degrees of Tumah chart, the only thing which is avi avos hatuma that requires 7 days and sprinkling of the para aduma is this human corpse, right? A dead animal is already one level lower, and that's an av hatuma. That's a nevela. That's an av hatuma. So that's what Rashi says. Rashi says, Hanogea b'meis l'chol nefesh adam. Right? It has to be a nefesh adam, meaning it has to be a person that in order for there to be avi avos hatuma. Okay? Good.
Can I
Yes.
just ask, why do we not have a Rashi on Yud Aleph where it's first mentioned, and this Rashi happens to be from 2 psukim later, the one you just read?
Because 2 psukim later, we're talking about the process of tahara.
I understand.
The
but the first time
hazaya.
Nogea b'meid is mentioned. I mean, you look and it's not there.
Okay, you're right. You're right. You have to ask Rashi.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you do that for me, please?
I'll try. Okay.
Yes.
So we have this idea of that it has to be a nefesh adam. Now, when I see the word adam, what am I thinking? Adam, it seems to be a human being, right? The first human being who wasn't Jewish was Adam Harishon. So when I hear the word Adam, I'm thinking about a human being. So, and that's precisely what the Ibn Ezra says, L'chol nefesh adam, says the Ibn Ezra, Yehudi o akum, right? Either a Jew or a non-Jew. If I touch a non-Jewish corpse, no, you don't have it. If I touch a non-Jewish corpse, that's what I'm here for. If I touch a non-Jewish corpse, so I become Tameh also. A non-Jewish corpse is an Avi Avos Hatuma, as is a Jewish corpse. So this Avi Avos Hatuma, Nigia through Avi Avos Hatuma, applies whether the dead person is Jewish or not Jewish, or was Jewish or wasn't Jewish. It applies under all of those circumstances. As I mentioned to you, we'll see Tumas Ohel might be different, and we need to try to figure out why Tumas Ohel might be different. But that's according to the Ibn Ezra, this idea of nefesh l'chol nefesh adam. Okay, back to the pasuk. Kol hanogea b'meis b'nefesh adam asher yamus v'lo. I jumped ahead. I apologize. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Hanogea b'meis l'chol nefesh adam b'tamei shiv'as yamim. Okay, how long is this individual tamei for? Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days, right? This individual is Tameh for 7 days. Where is the 7-day thing that connects with us? Where do we, what's the vestige of 7 days that we have? Well, we have creation of 7 days, but Shiva Nikiyim, the 7, when a woman is observing the laws of Taras HaMishpacha, so she needs to observe 7 Nikiyim, 7 days without any staining. Those are called Shiva Nikiyim, and there are particular laws as to how those Shiva Nikiyim are learned. So that's our connection to Shivas Yomim, okay? But what we're being told here is that a person who touches an Avi Avos Hatuma, meaning a person who is now an Av Hatuma, I'm an Av Hatuma, I cannot become tahor until 7 days have passed. So I have to wait 7 days. But during those 7 days, several things have to happen. In other words, if I just wait 7 days, I'm not like automatically tahor. I have to wait 7 days and undergo certain things. Now remember, we're learning this in the context of the Para Aduma. So what this is referring to is the Tahara process that will, in Yirtzeh Hashem, once again be in force when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt and we have the Para Aduma again, hopefully this coming Friday, all right, that the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, we'll have the Para Aduma again, and these laws will apply. This is the reason why people who do go up to Har Habayis, right? Jews who go up to Har Habayis, even though they go to the mikvah, and even though they're observing the laws, the particular laws of what you have to wear or not wear on Har Habayis, they have to be very careful where they walk because we are all Tamei Meis, right? Nobody is not, nobody's not Tamei Meis. I mean, maybe a baby, or a child. There are children, perhaps, who are not Tamei Meis, but they might have come into contact with someone who was Tamei Meis. So basically, we're all Tamei Meis. We've all either been in an ohel, right, been in an common space with a dead Jewish body, or we've touched a dead Jewish body, so we're all Tamei Meis. And the only way to remove that Tumas Meis is the ashes of the Paraduma, which we don't have today. What did they do with the ashes? So let's go on to the next pasuk. By the way, the reference to the 7 days of creation. So if you're understanding Tuma from a logical, rational perspective, so we understand 7 days. What is 7? 7 is the cycle, right? 7 days of creation, 7 days of the week, 7 years in the Shemitah cycle, 7 Shemitas in the Yovel cycle. 7 represents the natural evolution. So 7 days, okay, we're recycling, if you will, right? After 7 days, we sort of recycle, like the week, right? After 7 days, the week recycles. So we have that same idea, which is here. Okay, so 7 days. What happens during those 7 days? So Pasuk Yud Beis. The Torah tells us, Hu yischata bo. Okay, look at the English translation. He shall purify himself. Interesting. What is that Hebrew word? Yischata. What's the root of yischata?
Chet.
Chet. Right? Chet. What is a chet? Chet is a sin. Right? Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive us, God, ki chatanu, for we have transgressed. A chet is a sin. So what is the idea here of hu yischata bo? How is the English translating it? The English is translating it as he will purify himself. So we'll start next week with that, but I want to leave you with two other things. Rabbeinu Bechaye says as follows: there are two customs that people observe when leaving a cemetery. One of them I'm sure you're familiar with, one of them you might be familiar with. The one I'm sure you're familiar with is washing your hands, right? When you leave a cemetery, you wash your hands. Washing your hands when you leave a cemetery is different than washing your hands before you have bread. Washing your hands before you have bread is 2 or 3 times over one hand and then 2 or 3 times over the other hand. When you wash your hands upon leaving a cemetery, we alternate hands, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there are people who have 2 minhagim connected to washing hands at the cemetery. One minhag is that they don't dry their hands. I will talk about why they don't dry their hands, and which is particularly hard in the winter. And minhag number 2 is they spill out whatever water was in the cup, right, or the utensil that they were using to wash. So if you're in line behind somebody and they spill out the water, don't take it personally, right? Those are 2 minhagim that go along with washing hands. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, our washing our hands when leaving a cemetery is connected to this idea of washing and sprinkling the waters of the para aduma on us. It's a remez, it's a hint to that. There is a, he writes as follows, he says, Umikan, from this pasuk, Umikan yatsa ha-minhag shalanu berechitzas yadayim achar sheba'im min hamis. Okay. Remez lemei efer para, it's a hint, it's a reminiscence of the para aduma ashes. V'hu gam ken remez l'tchias hamesim. And it also is a remez, a hint to Tchias HaMesim, shekol ha'olam yihye nizhar min hatumah, right? That we when we leave a funeral, we want to sort of remember Tchias HaMesim. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, by washing our hands, this concept of tahara is reinforced, and it brings to mind the tahara of Tchias HaMesim. When the dead will be revived, everybody will be careful from tuma. Okay. A second. That's precisely the point. There won't be any. That's correct. Okay.
The second one you leave.
The second one. Anybody know the second one when you leave a cemetery?
Back out.
No. We're talking about leaving the cemetery. The mate is buried already. Leaving the cemetery. Leaving the cemetery. Anybody? There's a custom to pluck some grass and throw it behind you. You've seen it? Your mother used to do it, right? Plucking some grass and throwing it behind you. Cemetery workers are not happy about that. All right? Right? Plucking some grass and throwing it. Do you say the pasuk? There's a thing you're supposed to say. Plucking some grass and throwing it behind you. Okay.
Is
So
this even after you visit or only if you?
no, whenever you leave a cemetery.
What's
Right?
the pasuk?
Right?
What's
So
the derivative?
Yes.
so here, so Rabbeinu Bechaye says, Gam telishas ha'asavim, right? The plucking of the grass is a remez lazeh, is a hint to this. Ki ha'esev la'es erev yimolel v'yaveshu b'boker yatzitz, right? Grass withers and dies and comes back hopefully comes back every year. So the idea is that's the concept of Tchias HaMesim. We're plucking the grass, right, to remind ourselves that as the grass withers and dies, so too death is only a temporary state, and ultimately death will be reversed in the process of Tchias HaMesim.
That's it.
V'yatzitzu me'ir ke'esev ha'aretz. Okay, so we'll end here, and Im Yirtzeh Hashem continue next week, moving through this process of Tuma and Tara. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good class.
Is he still on?
Well, you probably had a cancellation.
Hold on a second. We have, there were two people who were on. No, just me now. Sorry, he left. I'm not sure if that's.
He left.
I don't know what time he left, and I don't want to